The stench of Nexus Station assaulted the senses recycled air, unwashed bodies, and the metallic temps of engine exhaust. A precarious collection of salvaged ship parts and prefabricated modules, the station clung to the edge of civilized space, like a parasite, thriving on lawlessness and desperation. Kaiden entered through the lower docking bay, each step measured and deliberate. His armor, once the pride of the Sentinel Order, was now a patchwork of mismatched plates, scarred by plasma burns and projectile impacts. Rust had claimed the edges, spreading like a disease across the once pristine surface. The narrow visor of his helmet revealed nothing of the man beneath, reflecting only the harsh fluorescent lights of the station's main corridor. Traders and mercenaries stepped aside, not out of respect but wariness. Even in decay, the armor carried a presence that whispered of battles fought and survived when others had fallen. "Haven't seen Sentinel armor in years?" muttered a Relosian trader, his four nostrils flaring with interest. Thought they were all dead. Kaiden moved past without acknowledgement, heading deeper into the station's sprawling marketplace. For 3 days, he observed, spoke to no one, and revealed nothing. He slept upright against walls, never removing his helmet, consuming only water and nutrient bars purchased from automated dispensers. On the 4th day, Torin approached, a slave trader known throughout 3 systems for his specialty in exotic merchandise. He circled Kaiden with the practiced scrutiny of someone evaluating potential profit. "Interesting relic you're wearing," Torin said, teeth stained purple from chewing stimulant leaves. Collapsed design, isn't it? Must be worth something to the right collector. Kaiden turned slightly, acknowledging the presence without offering. Response: "I have a proposition." Torin gestured toward a nearby holding pen. "Something unusual came into my possession yesterday. Limited market appeal, but perhaps valuable to someone with particular interests." Inside the energy-fenced enclosure sat a blue-skinned humanoid female. Her skin was the deep azure of Corellian nobility, marked with subtle phosphorescent patterns that pulsed faintly with her breathing. Violet eyes stared defiantly from beneath a shock of silver-white hair. Despite the restraints binding her wrists, she maintained a posture of pride, shoulders back, chin raised. "Beautiful coloring," Torin continued, lowering his voice. "But the market's flooded with Corellians since their homeworld fell. This one's educated, though speaks 5 languages. Trained in stellar navigation, name's Nyx." The helmet turned fully toward the pen. The Corellian woman's eyes narrowed, studying the armored figure with sudden intensity. "I'll make you a deal." Torin leaned closer. "Trade me that armor, and she's yours. Even rusted Sentinel tech fetches a premium from collectors." He smiled, revealing more purple-stained teeth. "For that scrap, just her? She's practically worthless anyway." For a long moment, Kaiden remained motionless. The marketplace bustled around them, merchants hawking wares, security drones buzzing overhead, music blaring from nearby establishments. Then, with deliberate slowness, he nodded. Word spread quickly. A crowd gathered to witness the unusual transaction: an armored warrior trading protection for a slave. Some came to mock, others out of curiosity. A few watched with predatory intent, calculating the vulnerability that would follow. In the center of an impromptu ring of onlookers, Kaiden began removing his armor. Each piece came free with a pneumatic hiss, first a shoulder guard, then a bracer, a chest plate. He placed each component carefully on the ground before him. "I've seen strip shows with better rhythm," someone called, generating scattered laughter. But as more armor fell away, the laughter died. What lay beneath was not what anyone expected. His body was a topography of suffering. Burns covered much of his exposed skin, not random battle injuries, but deliberate markings. Along his arms ran geometric patterns of raised tissue, telling stories of systematic torture. Most striking was what became visible when he removed the chest piece. Etched into his collarbone was a symbol, a shielded eye surrounded by 7 stars. The unmistakable insignia of the Sentinel Order's 7th Division. The crowd fell silent. The Sentinels were Legion's elite guardians tasked with protecting humanity's outermost colonies during the Great Expansion. Known for their unbreakable code and their willingness to stand between civilians and certain death. They were thought extinct, eliminated during the corporate wars 15 years ago. Nyx stood suddenly, pressing against the energy barrier of her enclosure. Recognition flashed across her features, her luminescent markings pulsing brighter with emotion. "It's you," she whispered, voice carrying in the silence. "You were there." Turan deactivated the energy barrier with trembling hands, his earlier confidence replaced by visible unease. The symbol on Caden's collarbone, the shielded eye surrounded by 7 stars, was more than just an insignia. It was a reminder of authority that had supposedly been erased from existence. "The trade is complete," Caden said, his voice rough from disuse. Like stone grinding against stone, Nyx stepped forward cautiously, her restraints still active. Turan fumbled with the control pad, deactivating them with a soft electronic chirp. The crowd remained silent, a collective breath held as the significance of what they were witnessing settled over them. "A sentinel," someone whispered. 7th Division, the Guardians of the Outer Rim. Caden gathered a simple shirt from his pack, pulling it over his scarred torso. Without the armor, he appeared both more vulnerable and more dangerous a weapon. Without a sheath, his face, now fully visible, was weathered by years of hardship, a jagged scar running from his left temple to his jaw. Eyes, a startling amber, remained alert, constantly scanning for threats. "We should go," he murmured to Nyx, who nodded. Still watching him with a mixture of awe and uncertainty, they hadn't reached the marketplace exit. When the first transmission blared across the station's public address system, "Attention all Nexus Station. Residents and visitors. A reward of 50,000 credits has been authorized for information, leading to the apprehension of a male human bearing sentinel markings. An additional 25,000 credits for the Corellian female in his company. Approach with extreme caution." "Fast," Nyx remarked, her voice melodic despite the tension. "The corporations have informants everywhere," Caden replied, changing direction toward a maintenance corridor. "Sentinel command codes are worth more than either of us can imagine. They navigated through service tunnels and emergency ducts, the forgotten arteries of Nexus Station." Caden moved with the certainty of someone who had studied the layout extensively, leading them through paths that avoided major surveillance nodes. "How do you know these routes?" Nyx asked as they paused. "In an abandoned storage compartment, both breathing hard from exertion?" "Sentinel training," he replied, peering through a narrow gap in the doorway. "We memorized the structure of every border station, standard procedure." A distant clanging sound echoed through the metal corridor's heavy boots on grated flooring. Caden pulled her deeper into the shadows as the sound grew closer. "The corporate alliance still has active military contracts buried in station systems," he explained in a whisper. "Once word spreads that a sentinel is alive, they'll activate those contracts." "Why?" "The war is over. The collapse happened. What threat could you possibly pose now?" His eyes met hers in the dim light. "It's not about what I've done. It's about what I could authorize." The footsteps grew louder, then faded as they passed the storage compartment. They waited another minute before continuing their escape. They reached a rarely used docking bay, where salvage ships occasionally offloaded scrap metal. A small maintenance shuttle, little more than a pressurized cabin with minimal thrusters, sat untended on the far side. "Can you fly?" Caden asked. "Navigation was part of my training," Nyx replied, her violet eyes glinting with determination. "I can pilot anything with thrusters." They were halfway across the bay when the first shot rang out a high-energy pulse. Struck the wall beside them, superheating the metal and sending molten droplets scattering across the floor. Nyx cried out as one landed on her arm. Searing through the thin fabric of her sleeve, 3 figures in tactical gear emerged from behind a stack of cargo containers. Weapons raised, not station security mercenaries. The lead hunter wore the insignia of the Phoenix Corporation, one of the dominant powers that had filled the vacuum left by the collapse. "Surrender the Sentinel, and the Corellian will be released unharmed," the mercenary announced, voice amplified through his helmet speaker. Caden pushed Nyx behind him, scanning the bay for options. "When I move, run for the shuttle." "I won't leave you," she protested. "Yes, you will." Without warning, he lunged toward a nearby control panel, slamming his fist against the emergency release. Klaxons blared as the bay's atmospheric containment field initiated decompression protocols. The sudden pressure shift sent loose equipment sliding toward the bay doors as warning lights flashed. The mercenaries fired, but the chaotic conditions threw off their aim. One bolt caught Nyx in the shoulder, spinning her around with the impact. She collapsed against a storage crate, face contorted in pain. Kaiden was at her side instantly, lifting her with surprising strength for his lean frame. The shuttle was 30 meters away across the increasingly treacherous floor. The mercenaries were regrouping, adjusting their magnetic boots to compensate for the changing conditions. "Hold on," he said, and began half-carrying, half-dragging her toward their escape. They reached the shuttle as another volley of energy bolts sliced through the air around them. The hatch opened to his emergency override, code another relic of his Sentinel authority that still functioned. He pushed her inside, then followed, sealing the hatch behind them. The shuttle's systems were outdated but functional. Within moments, they had disengaged from the docking clamps and were accelerating away from Nexus Station, punching through the decompression field and into open space. But their problems were just beginning. Nyx slumped in the co-pilot's seat, indigo blood seeping from the wound in her shoulder. "Medical kit," Kaiden said, gesturing to a compartment behind her seat. "Can you reach it?" She tried, but the movement sent fresh waves of pain through her injured shoulder, her face paling to a lighter shade of blue, sweat beading on her forehead. He set the shuttle on autopilot once they were clear of the station's immediate vicinity, then retrieved the kit himself. Their eyes met briefly hers, filled with pain, with something that might have been concern. For the first time in 15 years, Kaiden found himself responsible for someone else's survival. The weight of it settled on him like his armor never had. The Shimmer Flats stretched before them like a sea of crystallized death-fast salt plains that had once been an inland ocean before environmental catastrophe had evaporated the water, leaving behind a toxic, mineral-rich desert. The sky hung low and gray, perpetually overcast with clouds heavy with acidic moisture that never quite fell as rain. They had abandoned the shuttle 3 days earlier after detecting a tracking signal embedded in its navigation system. Now they traveled on foot across the endless white expanse, their only shelter a thermal tarp that Kaiden erected each night. Nyx's shoulder was healing. The Medijo from the shuttle's emergency kit had accelerated the natural regeneration abilities of her species. She could move her arm now, though with limited range. "How much farther?" she asked, squinting against the glare reflecting off the salt crystals. "Another day to the outpost," Kaiden replied. "Old mining facility, abandoned after the collapse." They walked in silence for another hour, conserving energy and water. The environmental suits they'd salvaged from the shuttle offered minimal protection from the caustic atmosphere, but their filters were already showing signs of saturation. A distant humming sound broke the silence. Kaiden reacted instantly, pulling Nyx down behind a jagged salt formation. "Drone," he whispered, eyes scanning the hazy sky. The machine appeared a moment later, a sleek black oval with multiple sensor arrays protruding from its underside. Corporate design, military grade. It moved in a methodical search pattern, sweeping low over the salt flats. "They're still looking," Nyx said. "They won't stop." The drone drifted closer to their position, its sensors apparently detecting something of interest. Kaiden reached slowly for a broken panel they'd salvaged from the shuttle, a piece of reinforced metal about the size of his torso. "Stay here," he instructed, then burst from cover, running perpendicular to the drone's path. The machine reacted immediately, pivoting and accelerating toward him. Its underside opened, revealing a weapons array that began to power up with an ominous hum. He dodged the first energy pulse. Diving behind another salt formation that partially dissolved under the impact, the drone circled, preparing for another attack, with practiced timing. Kaiden emerged again, this time hurling the metal panel like a discus. It spun through the air, catching a thermal updraft that carried it directly into the drone's path. The machine attempted evasive maneuvers too late. The panel sliced through one of its stabilizer fins, sending it into an uncontrolled spiral. He was on it before it could recover, smashing its sensor array with a rock, then tearing out its communication module. The drone shuddered, emitting a high-pitched whine before shutting down completely. Nix approached cautiously as he dismantled the remains, salvaging what components might be useful. "Why wear the armor all this time?" she asked, watching him work. "All these years in hiding." He paused, hands deep in the drone's innards, "so they wouldn't know I was still alive." She considered this, violet eyes studying his face. "Then everything changes now." He met her gaze, and for a moment, something like resignation crossed his features. "Yes, everything." That night, huddled beneath the thermal tarp as the temperature plummeted, Nix broke the silence that had fallen between them. "You were there when my sister's settlement was attacked?" Kaiden stared up at the tarp, remembering Pax Colony. 15 years ago, you pulled her from the rubble." "I pulled many people from rubble." Nix shifted, turning to face him in the dim light. "She described a sentinel who carried her through fire when the corporate bombardment began. Said he had eyes like amber stones." Her hand moved hesitantly toward his face, fingertips hovering near the scar on his jawline. "The same eyes I'm looking at now." He didn't pull away from her touch. "What happened to her?" "She survived. Started a new life on Elysium. Has a family now." Nix's luminescent markings pulsed softly with emotion. "She told me what really happened, how the Sentinels defied orders to protect civilians when the corporations decided to cleanse settlements that refused their governance." Kaiden closed his eyes briefly. "We were supposed to maintain order, not enable massacre. You were heroes. We were executed for treason." His voice hardened. "I watched my entire division die at Station 8 Edge. Only survived because I was trapped under debris during the purge." Her fingers finally made contact with his skin, tracing the edge of his scar. "Yet you kept the armor, kept the insignia burned into your flesh, to remember." Their faces were close now, breath mingling in the cold air. Something electric passed between them, a connection forged in shared danger and mutual recognition. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving her." "For saving me." The kiss happened without conscious decision, her lips cool against his, hesitant at first, then more certain. His hand found the back of her neck, pulling her closer. 15 years of isolation crumbling in an instant of connection. Morning found them entangled beneath the thermal tarp, her head resting on his chest, his arm protectively around her shoulders. The intimacy of the night had transformed something between them, creating a vulnerability more dangerous than any pursuit. They continued across the salt flats as the day waned, the drone's remains left behind as a mute testament to their passage. By nightfall, they had reached the edge of the waste, where the endless white gave way to rocky terrain dotted with the skeletal remains of ancient vegetation. The mining outpost appeared on the horizon the following morning. Collection of prefabricated structures half buried in sand and salt deposits. No signs of recent occupation were visible, but both remained cautious as they approached. "Wait here," Kaiden said, drawing a makeshift weapon fashioned from drone parts. "I'll check for hostiles." "We should stay together," Nix argued, to sets of eyes. He nodded after a moment's consideration. They advanced slowly, covering each other as they moved from building to building. The outpost appeared genuinely abandoned. Equipment lay where it had been dropped years ago, workstations covered in a thick layer of salt dust. "We can use this place," Kaiden said, examining a communication array that might be salvageable. "Send false signals, misdirect them." "For how long?" Nix asked. "We can't hide forever." Before he could answer, a blinding light flooded the outpost, multiple spotlights activated simultaneously, illuminating them from all directions. An amplified voice boomed across the compound. "Sentinel Officer Designation KD-7, you are surrounded. Surrender immediately." Kaiden pushed Nix behind him, scanning for escape routes that no longer existed. A dozen armed figures emerged from concealed positions. Weapons trained on them, not mercenaries this time, but military. Former Alliance soldiers now serving corporate masters. "How did they find us?" Nix whispered, his expression hardened with realization. "They weren't tracking the shuttle. They were tracking me." His hand went to his collarbone, to the Sentinel insignia burned into his flesh. "The symbol contains a quantum marker. Only activates in proximity to certain frequencies, like a drone scanning signal. Like the drone you destroyed, Nix concluded. Exactly. The soldiers closed in, forming a tight circle around them. One figure stepped forward, an older man wearing the insignia of a commander, though the uniform was no longer standard military issue. His face was deeply lined with cold eyes that evaluated them with clinical detachment. KD-7, the commander said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. You've led us on quite a chase. Commander Vance Kaidan responded, recognition and loathing mingling in his tone. Still doing the corporation's dirty work, I see. Strategic Asset Acquisition Specialist is my official title now, Vance replied with a thin smile. Better pay. Same objectives. Vance's smile vanished. Secure them both. Separate containment. Full restraints on the Sentinel. As the soldiers moved to comply, Kaidan made one desperate lunge toward Nix, pressing something into her hand before. They were roughly pulled apart. She glimpsed a small data chip before closing her fist around it, concealing it from their captors. You were supposed to die on Station 8 Edge, Vance said, as shock restraints were locked around Kaidan's wrists and ankles, along with the rest of your division. Kaidan's eyes burned with cold fury as he responded, I was supposed to save the ones left behind. The makeshift holding cells were repurposed storage units, windowless metal boxes with reinforced doors. They had separated, Nix and Kaidan immediately upon returning to the camp that had been established near the mining outpost. Through the thin wall of her cell, Nix could occasionally hear movements from the adjacent unit where she assumed he was being held. The data chip he had pressed into her hand remained hidden in a tear she'd made in the seam of her environmental suit. Whatever information it contained, he had deemed it important enough to risk transferring it during their capture. The door to her cell swung open abruptly, revealing Commander Vance flanked by two guards. His gaze swept dismissively over her before he gestured for the guards to bring her out. Your companion has been uncooperative, Vance said, as they marched her across the camp. Perhaps you can provide context for his activities. I know nothing, Nix replied. I was a slave until a few days ago. Vance's thin lips curved in a humorless smile. Yet he traded his armor for you specifically. Why? He recognized me. My sister, yes. It's the famous rescue. One of the Sentinel's last humanitarian. Gestures before they exceeded their authority and had to be tired. They approached a larger structure at the center of the camp, a command post, fashioned from modular military units. Inside, displays showed various surveillance feeds and tactical information. At the center stood a transparent containment field, and within it, Kaidan? He was suspended several inches above the ground. Energy restraints at wrists and ankles holding him spread eagle. His face showed evidence of interrogation, a split lip, bruising around one eye. His gaze found Nix as she entered, and something passed between them, not quite relief, but acknowledgement, recognition of a shared fate. Now then, Vance said, circling the containment field. Let's discuss what happens next. He activated a wall display showing an official document. As per Emergency Order 729. All surviving members of the Sentinel Order are to be processed for crimes against humanity, specifically exceeding military authority, implementing unauthorized protocols, and interfering with corporate sovereign interests. You mean stopping the bombardment of civilian settlements? Kaidan said, his voice rough but steady. Your division disobeyed direct orders. We prevented a massacre. Vance waved a hand dismissively. Ancient history. What matters now is containing the damage. He turned to Nix. Do you know what makes him so valuable? It's not just the Sentinel training or the classified information he possesses. It's the command codes. Nix frowned. Command codes? Sentinel officers of his rank were implanted with quantum-encrypted command protocols. Override codes that could take control of military systems in emergency situations. Vance's eyes gleamed with cold interest. Those codes are still valid in certain legacy systems. Systems that control orbital platforms, defensive arrays, even some planetary infrastructure. The corporations want those codes, Kaidan stated flatly. Several interested parties are willing to pay handsomely, Vance confirmed. But extraction is complicated. The codes are neurologically locked, They can't simply be tortured out of you. They require specific activation conditions. Then, you've wasted your time, Kaiden said. Vance smiled thinly. Not at all. We've arranged a public execution tomorrow at noon. All remaining personnel in this region will witness justice delivered to a sentinel criminal. And during that execution, we'll create exactly the conditions needed to trigger those codes. You can't access them without my cooperation, Kaiden insisted. That's where you're wrong, Vance replied. The emergency protocols activate under extreme duress when the officer perceives an immediate threat to civilian lives. His gaze shifted to Nix. We found that threatening to execute innocent bystanders creates precisely the right neural pattern. That night, in the darkness of her cell, Nix carefully examined the data chip Kaiden had passed to her. Standard neural interface model designed to be inserted at the base of the skull, delivering information directly to the brain. Without the proper equipment, she had no way to access its contents. The door to her cell opened quietly. A guard entered younger than the others, with nervous eyes that darted toward the corridor. I don't have much time, he whispered. I was at Pax Colony. My family survived because of the Sentinels. He pressed a small device into her hand. This will help with the chip. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. Before she could respond, he was gone, the door sliding shut behind him. Hours later, as artificial dawn broke over the camp, Nix was led once again to the command center. Kaiden remained in the containment field, looking more haggard but still defiant. The execution has been moved forward, Vance announced. Our corporate sponsors are eager for results. They'll be disappointed, Kaiden said. Vance approached the field controls. We'll see. Perhaps a demonstration will convince you to cooperate. He adjusted a setting. Kaiden's body convulsed as energy coursed through the restraints. Nix lunged forward instinctively, only to be restrained by the guards. Interesting, Vance observed, watching her reaction. It seems the connection goes both ways. He turned to Kaiden. Last chance. Voluntarily activate the command codes, or watch her die before your execution. Through gritted teeth, Kaiden replied, You know that's not how the protocols work. It can't be accessed voluntarily. Then we proceed as planned. Vance nodded. To the guards, prepare them both for transport to the execution grounds. As they were led away, Nix caught Kaiden's eye. Silent communication passed between them, determination, resolve, and something deeper that had grown in their short time together. Whatever happened next, they would face it united. The execution grounds had been hastily assembled in the central courtyard of the mining facility. A raised platform stood in the center, surrounded by portable force field generators to prevent any last-minute escape attempts. Beyond the platform, rows of seats had been arranged for witnesses, mostly corporate representatives and military personnel. With a scattering of local settlers brought in to create the appearance of public justice, Nix and Kaiden were led to the platform in full. Restraints, a squad of armed guards surrounding them. The morning sun reflected harshly off the salt-encrusted ground, creating a blinding glare that seemed appropriately apocalyptic. Commander Vance stood at a podium, his uniform pristine, expression solemn as if officiating a somber but necessary duty rather than an elaborate execution designed to extract valuable data. Today, we bring to justice one of the last criminals of the corporate wars, Vance announced, his voice amplified across the courtyard. Sentinel Officer KD7, guilty of treason, insurrection, and crimes against established order. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Most had never seen a sentinel in person. The elite guardians were figures of legend now, 15 years after their supposed extinction. The sentence, as mandated by Emergency Order 729, is death. Vance turned toward Kaiden. Do you have any final statement? Kaiden raised his head, surveying the crowd with amber eyes that revealed nothing of his thoughts. The Sentinels stood for protection of all citizens, regardless of corporate affiliation. We chose humanity over profit. History will remember that truth long after your corporations have fallen. Vance's expression tightened slightly, the only indication that the words had affected him. He gestured to a technician who approached with a neural scanner. Before execution, standard procedure requires scanning for any implanted devices or contraband. His eyes met Caden's with cold triumph. Of course, in your case, we're particularly interested in certain neural pathways. The technician moved. Behind Kaiden, placing the scanner at the base of his skull, Nyx watched carefully, feeling the weight of the data chip and activation device hidden in her clothing. The guard who had helped her had whispered instructions. When the scanner activates, it creates an electromagnetic field that will temporarily disrupt the restraints. That's your only chance. Scanning complete, the technician announced after a moment. Neural pathways identified. Ready to record emergency protocol activation. Vance nodded, then turned to Nyx. Bring the Corellian forward. Two guards moved to position Nyx in front of Kaiden. Their eyes met briefly, a lifetime of communication compressed into a single glance. The protocols activate when a Sentinel perceives an imminent threat to civilian life, Vance explained, drawing a ceremonial sidearm from his holster. So we've created exactly that scenario. He leveled the weapon at Nyx's head. Your final choice? KD7. Watch her die, knowing your codes will activate automatically in response or cooperate and access them voluntarily. Either way, we get what we want. A tense silence fell over the assembly. Even the corporate representatives seemed uncomfortable with the public execution of an unarmed woman. I told you, Kaiden said quietly. That's not how the protocols work. We'll see. Vance's finger tightened on the trigger. In that moment, several things happened simultaneously. The neural scanner, still active behind Kaiden, emitted a sharp electronic pulse. As predicted, the restraints around both prisoners flickered momentarily. Nyx dropped to the ground, rolling beneath the trajectory of Vance's weapon while extracting the data chip from its hiding place. Kaiden, freed from his restraints, lunged toward Vance with the speed and precision that had made the Sentinels legendary. Before the guards could react, he had disarmed the commander and thrown him to the ground. Chaos erupted. Guards rushed the platform as corporate representatives fled. The local settlers, with no stake in the conflict, scattered in all directions. Nyx, Kaiden shouted above the commotion. Now she moved to him, data chip in hand. With practiced precision, she pressed it against the base of his skull, right where the neural scanner had identified the access point for his implanted codes. The chip adhered, interfacing instantly with his neural pathways. Kaiden gasped, his body going rigid as information flooded his consciousness. The chip contained more than just activation protocols. It held the combined command codes of every Sentinel officer who had fallen at Station 8 Edge, entrusted to him by his dying commander. 15 years ago, systems accessing, he said, voice distant, as if speaking from another place entirely. Emergency protocol. Alpha 7. Ninner. Authentication. Guardian of the Rim. Throughout the mining facility, long-dormant systems suddenly activated. Communication. Arrays powered up, connecting to orbital networks that had been silent for years. Defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments, their targeting systems locking onto Vance's forces. This facility, Nyx realized, looking around with new understanding. It wasn't just a mining outpost. Sentinel fallback position, Kaiden confirmed. His consciousness splitting between the physical world and the command network now flowing. Through his mind, one of many established throughout the rim, waiting for activation, Vance struggled to his feet, face contorted with fury. Stop him. Kill them both. But it was too late. The facility's defense systems had already identified friendly and hostile forces. Containment fields activated around Vance and his troops, immobilizing them instantly. What have you done? Vance demanded, pressing against the invisible barrier that held him. Activated the contingency plan, Kaiden replied. 15 years ago, when we realized the corporations were planning to eliminate the Sentinels, we created a failsafe. Not to seize power, but to ensure the truth would eventually be known. From the communication array, a powerful signal now, broadcast across all frequencies, reaching every settlement, station, and ship within 50 light-years. The signal carried data-altered records of corporate decisions, military orders, and the true history of the collapse. The people deserve to know who really betrayed them, Kaiden said. It wasn't the Sentinels who exceeded their authority. It was the corporations who decided civilian lives were acceptable collateral damage in their quest for control. Nyx stood beside him, her hand finding his as they watched the facility transform around them. More systems activated, revealing hidden chambers and equipment that had waited patiently for this moment. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Kaiden's eyes, still reflecting the data stream flowing through his consciousness, turned to her. "Now we rebuild. There are other facilities like this one. Other survivors, perhaps." The Sentinels were never meant to be an army or a government, just guardians, protectors, and us. Her luminescent markings pulsed with emotion, fingers intertwining. With his free hand, gently traced the contours of her face. "I've been alone for 15 years, Nyx. I don't want to be alone anymore." The kiss they shared was witnessed by the rising sun as it broke through the perpetual cloud cover of the Shimmer Flats for the first time in decades, a new dawn for more than just the two of them. In the following weeks, the signal continued to spread. Settlements long oppressed by corporate rule began to resist. Other Sentinel facilities activated, revealing caches of supplies, medical equipment, and defense systems that had been hidden away for just such a moment. Kaiden and Nyx remained at the heart of it all, not as leaders of a revolution, but as symbols of what was possible when people chose protection over profit, connection over isolation. "My sister would like to meet you properly," Nyx said one evening as they stood on the facility's observation deck, watching distant lights that represented new arrivals, people drawn to the promise of something better. "Like that," replied, the burden of 15 years of solitude finally lifting from his shoulders. He no longer needed the armor. Its purpose had been served. What had begun as a simple trade in a border station, marketplace had become something far greater, not just freedom for one Corellian woman, but potentially for all those who had suffered under corporate rule since the collapse. As night fell over the facility, now bustling with activity and hope, Kaiden looked to the stars with Nyx beside him. For the first time since watching his comrades fall at Station 8 Edge, he allowed himself to believe in a future beyond survival, a future where the scars of the past could finally begin to heal. The Guardian had made his sacrifice, trading armor for something far more valuable than protection. He had traded it for connection, for purpose, and ultimately for love.